All right, welcome everyone to our weekly team call. We've had so many exciting things happen this week. And tonight, our special guest is Dr. Frederick Templeman, who's going to share with us a little bit more about XanthoMyst and GlytaMyst and why we believe this is a dynamic duo that is a perfect combination for optimal health and wellness. So take it away, Doc.
Well, thank you. I guess what I've been doing this past while is reviewing as best I can in a couple of occasions where it seemed appropriate the history of what was exciting in the whole idea of supplementation for me starting 25 years ago, which was not when I started working with supplements, but it was the time that I began to become involved in the actual promotion of supplements with the mangosteen, as I did for probably close to 11 or 12 years at least. And the reason that I think about that, and I've been thinking about it, is because in a sense, we've come full circle. And by that, I mean that when I first started working with the formal entities, the actual companies that were doing supplementation, what we were talking about were antioxidants. There really wasn't much else to talk to in terms of scientific basis for the supplements. We certainly had lots and lots of stories, anecdotal recounting of the marvelous things that happened to people who used supplementation. But those stories were the only kind of evidence that existed. And that evidence, unfortunately, is what the medical skeptics would call Class D evidence. So it certainly wasn't Class A, Class B, Class C, but anecdotal evidence because of the possibility of having contamination from people's motives or from their recollections or whatever, or perhaps they were even choosing to lie. Certainly many doctors believe they were. They were set at naught by the authorities within academia and within medicine. And it was really only the argument that the body had an antioxidant system, which was both endogenous, meaning that the body itself produced certain antioxidants, and the master antioxidant, the strongest antioxidant that has ever been produced or put into the body, glutathione, was an endogenous antioxidant. So the body would take the amino acids from the proteins that were ingested from food, and it would take those three amino acids that are involved in the manufacture of glutathione and put them together intracellularly. Now, glutathione has never been anything that anybody can measure with any effect in blood. It's been done primarily in situations where people were interested in doing studies, and so it's been done academically. But as a practical blood test that anybody could get or use, it's still not around. And the reason it's not around is because it's so ephemeral. It doesn't last very long in the blood, and therefore it's extremely difficult to find because it is made in cells and it's made in great quantities in the liver. And of course, the liver will push excess glutathione into the bloodstream. But because the body cells are so avid to have this in there, and it's so essential for not only their health, but their very survival, that they take it up immediately. And so it's not around long enough to be able to measure very much of it at all. And the only place that they were really able to do this with any kind of efficacy was in patients who were extremely ill in ICUs. And there they were able to measure somewhat the glutathione. But in ordinary people, it just wasn't anything that they could measure. And that was the endogenous story of antioxidants. And then we learned through science how the major exogenous antioxidants and the endogenous, by exogenous, I mean things that are coming from outside, largely from food, plants, botanicals, where you could supplement with vitamin C, for example. And we all know where you can find vitamin C in food or in fruits and supplements. So they were showing how the two sort of meshed together, and they were able to show how the antioxidants from outside that were taken into the body would actually work with the antioxidants that were in the body, not only to accomplish the same sort of thing, but to help regenerate both the external and the antioxidants that were made inside the body. So we knew a lot about antioxidants, and therefore it became the most important banner for anybody to talk about if you were selling supplements. And they, at that particular time, and I'm talking 20 years ago, the dominant, well, actually more than 20 years ago, the dominant theory of aging was something that had been found in 1956 by a fellow called Denham Harmon. And this theory said that aging was caused by the gradual degeneration of tissues and cells under the attack of free radicals. And for him, primarily, these were produced when the body was in the midst of using the electron transfer system and making ATP, which is the universal energy, high energy potassium bond that everything in the body uses when they're trying to power whatever it is in the metabolic processes. And so it was fairly easy to understand. And even the layman could understand when we'd say that free radicals were unbalanced elements, and usually they were molecules, but they could be even much smaller than that, but that had an electron that was lacking. And therefore, they were going to do anything they could, and they had a very powerful electromagnetic pull, and they would rip off electrons from healthy tissue, and therefore would damage that tissue. And the way that the antioxidants worked is that they were, by definition, in possession of an extra electron, sometimes two. And they were therefore able to donate to these nasty little free radicals an electron so that they didn't go and rip it off some other piece of material that was particularly important. And therefore, they were kind of like soldiers protecting the elemental things in the body that if they were damaged, we would have big problems. And that's what the antioxidant theory was, and it was fairly easy for people to understand. And when we grabbed a hold of this piece of science, that the skeptics who were in medicine did not really sort of argue with, because there was not much they could argue with. It was very straightforward, and it held water. It made sense, and it even made sense when you were looking at it with drug science. So they didn't bother us about that. But within the industry, there was a tremendous agitation to immediately grab this only piece of science that referred to the antioxidant protection, and to try and make a case for the fact that my product has a stronger dose of antioxidants in it than your product. Therefore, use my product because it will protect your body more effectively. And the only effective measure that we had way back then was something called the ORAC value. And now the ORAC value was never clearly explained by anybody who was a proponent of measuring things with it, that it was an in vitro measure. In other words, it never could be measured inside a living organism. Now, there was one company that falsified in the most egregious way. And it's another story for not for tonight, but they falsified in the most egregious way a study that could never be repeated because it would have cost too much money for anybody to repeat it. But it was totally fraudulent. They did it in China. And it's still a pretty impressive piece of literature if you read it and recognize that what they were saying was impossible. And that is that they could measure ORAC inside the human body very exceptionally. And therefore, they could show not just in a petri dish, but in a living organism, that if you had a higher ORAC score, then you had some kind of an advantage over anybody who had a lower ORAC score. Now, I remember at the time that I told the company that I was working for, look, don't get involved in those ORAC wars. They really don't mean anything. It's sort of like a group of pubescent boys at the swimming pool at the swimming hole without underwear on, making comparisons about the size of things. It is no relevance whatsoever to the real effect of what a supplement was going to be able to do, even with antioxidant terms. But it became a war, and everyone was spiking things. They would spike it with inorganic elements, and we kind of lost the patina of acceptability that we had gained with the medical profession by engaging in such shenanigans. Now, since then, we have many, far more accurate, and many of the measures of antioxidant potential now can measure what happens inside an organic system, but at that time it just didn't exist. And so Denham's theory about the way that the body aged really held sway for very close to 40 years. And then we began to realize that aging just wasn't a phenomenon that could be explained by any simple theorem, and that there were many theories and very many variables in why we aged. And even those of you who have been in the supplement business for quite a while will remember that everyone got excited about telomeres, and then they got excited about genetic mistakes. And there are now at least 25 theories of aging, and all of them have something to bring to the table that helps us understand this very complex problem that everybody faces eventually. So it's really important. And even a group of people for about the last 15 years have been regarding aging as if it were a disease, and thinking that we should be going at it with the same methodology that we use for medicine. But it became very confusing. And I believe, and I've always believed, that there's little purpose in having a theory that really doesn't allow you to have a practical strategy to follow as a result of the theory. And when you look at the telomere length, there never was any kind of supplement that could adequately explain how, if you took it, it was going to make your telomeres longer and allow you to change the chronological clock, not the chronological, but the biological clock that determined your aging. So it was really a theory that brought a lot of information to the table, but insufficient ties to the practical world, that there was nothing you could do with that theory. And that was also the theory of the error theory, that the accumulation of problems with DNA and how it governs, and the functions of the body, and how it gets turned off and how it gets turned on, etc. We simply did not come away with any direct links that were validated, that would show that if you took this particular supplement, or if you took that particular supplement, you could make a big difference as far as this particular theory of aging was concerned, and bring about a change in your chronological age. And those of you who have followed the anti-aging movement will see that there just hasn't been a great deal. You know, NAD plus used to be one of the things that they looked at, and we knew that there were things like resveratrol that would possibly influence it, but all of the studies to try and prove that there was a direct link between how you used resveratrol and what happened as far as your age was concerned really didn't pan out. So many years afterwards, where do we find ourselves? Well, we find ourselves with a lot more information about the way the body functions, and we know a lot more about the intricacies of the process of aging, but we still don't have anything that is particularly practical except what good old Denham said in 1956, because we know that the botanical world is full of incredible antioxidants. And we know that the body uses those antioxidants that it borrows from the environment, and that we can make a difference not only in aging, but in many other different things in a measurable way, particularly since we have something more than ORAC to measure with. And that's where we are again. So we're back literally at the beginning and looking at all these theories of aging and saying, you know, they're real nice and they do help us to understand the process better, but none of them are attached to any kind of practical intervention that you could recommend to people with any kind of confidence that if you do this, you're going to make a difference in the way your skin looks, or you're going to make a difference in the aging process of any of your body systems, with the exception of the free radical theory of aging. So we now here with this company have two very, very potent, extremely advanced in terms of the technological science that is involved in the making and the delivery of it, because we can now deliver as effectively as if we were giving it IV. And therefore, being able to do that means that you can put amounts of supplements into the body very much more effectively than you ever could before if you were using or depending only upon the digestive tract of the body to be the agent that rendered things small and then was able to put them into a situation where they could work inside cells, which is where things have to eventually get, because the cells are the real machinery and the only machinery really of the body at a microscopic level. So we got these two products, and a lot of people have asked me, so why do we have two tremendous antioxidant products? And the answer that I would give them is there are certainly more than two compartments in the human body, but there are there's a fairly good distinction between those two compartments, because one of them is extracellular. So we have lots of areas within our body, and it's not well known by the ordinary layperson just exactly where they are. And that's what that slide was that I put up there. Can you put that slide back up so I can see it? So you can also see this slide, and it'll be in other places where you can see it. And it's certainly not the be all and the end all, but what it does is explain that if you can really amplify the antioxidant defenses of the body intracellularly by a supplement from the outside, which we've never been able to do. We were only able to give something and hope that the body would look after it and get it there if we gave more of it, or if you used more of it and gave it and put it into the digestive tract, would it eventually get in greater amounts into the intracellular area? But we couldn't really prove that because it's extremely difficult to take a look at the inside of a cell with any kind of accuracy. So we could look at extracellular places. For example, we could look at many antioxidants, vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin E, in the bloodstream, which is not intracellular for the most part, but it's extracellular. There are cellular elements in there, such as the white blood cells of the immune system and the red blood cells which are used for the transport of oxygen and other things to the cells. So we could look inside that particular compartment, and yes, we could see some differences, and we could see that you can raise them and how you raise them, and you can also see them in deficiency states and understand what those deficiency states were, etc. But there are, for example, we have the lymph system. And that's not easily sampled, but it can be sampled. The plasma we've just talked about. And we have interstitial fluid. If you wanted to look at the body, everybody knows that liquid, or water really, is the predominant element within the body that keeps everything from rubbing together, that sort of lets us live as agglomerations of trillions of cells that sort of float around and are attached to each other in ways that are different in different tissues, but certainly they all involve interstitial fluid. And that interstitial fluid just means the fluid that is between cells, all cells, and in greater or lesser amounts. We also have transcellular fluids. And certain of you will understand that we sample central spinal fluid when there are certain kinds of infections, particularly meningitis. We will check and put a needle into the back and go into that closed cavity that holds central spinal fluid, which also goes up and fills the ventricles of the brain and covers the whole of the brain and sort of cushions the brain and brings nutrients to it, but also can be attacked by invaders from the outside, and you can get fungal, and you can get viral, and you can get bacterial infections of that particular compartment as well. Then you have peritoneal. Now, the peritoneum is that area. It's kind of bounded by a membrane, but it's very large. It's getting larger in North America because it's the belly. It's everything we call the lower abdomen. And it has a particular kind of fluid within it that is special in its composition, and it has many, many uses, and it can be affected by disease. So it's a peritoneal fluid. We have pericardial fluid. We have a pericardium, a little package, if you wish, that has a lot. It covers the whole of the heart, and between the outside of it and the inside of it is a fluid that is in there to make sure that there's no friction that takes place as the heart moves many, many thousands of times in a day, and there is no friction, no wearing, no whatever it is. And so that can also be invaded and have problems, etc. We have the pleural fluid, which is, again, another covering, but this time for the lungs, and it does the same thing. It prevents friction. It is there for many other reasons besides simply preventing friction, and it can be invaded and have problems, etc. We also have the aqueous and the vitreous humor, which are the liquids in the front and the back of the eye, that have their purposes, and they're very different from everything else. So you can see that when we talk about extracellular areas of the body, we're talking about a lot of places that are extremely important to keep clean and to make sure that when there is inflammation, that you can do something to reduce that inflammation with antioxidants to be able to maintain the homeostatic balance that represents health. Now, when we look at the intracellular area, nobody has any difficulty understanding that the body's made up of trillions of cells and that they're all different according to the tissues and to the organs to which they belong. And they have no problem understanding that 70% of the volume of any given cell is, again, liquid. And in the case of glutathione, glutathione is manufactured by the body inside the cells. It is not manufactured in any of the extracellular spaces, which makes it difficult to measure. But we do know that when the liver, which is a large factory for the manufacture of glutathione, dumps glutathione into the bloodstream, that it disappears in a fraction of a second, because the avidity of the cells to be able to have this master antioxidant, which really makes sure that you can live. For example, they have a type of mouse called a knockout mouse. And knockout mice are things where you change genetically the makeup of the mouse so that something which is found in normal mice is not found. And we want to find out what happens if you knock that out. Well, with knockout mice, where you knock out glutathione, they can live for only a few hours. So it's obviously essential to life. It's in the category of things like NAD plus, where if you haven't got it in 8 seconds, you're dead. So it's really, really important that it be intracellularly present to protect the area of the body that is exposed to the most endogenous free radicals. Because when you take and burn carbohydrates, as we probably most of us do, to make ATP through the electron transfer system in the mitochondria, these are the organelles which are found, multiple organelles which are found inside every cell and which produce energy. And they are, I mean, that's a wonderful story about the mitochondria. We could talk about its role in cancer. I happen to believe that the genetic theory of cancer is completely wrong. It's really backwards, and that if you look at the metabolic theory of cancer, which focuses upon the degradation of the mitochondria, that you're much closer to the source, and that many things that the the oncologist and the standard medicine believes are the cause of cancer are really not the cause, but they're downstream effects of the degeneration of the mitochondria and what happens when that goes on. But we have nobody who's arguing one side or the other of any particular point of view that certainly the mitochondria generate more free radicals than any other function in the body in health. So they're going on all the time, doing the right stuff. And when they do the right stuff, they have exhaust, if you wish to call it, that is there and needs to be looked after. And that's what glutathione looks after inside the cells. So you will find glutathione being made inside the organelles, which are the small things that reflect. We have a liver that is a detoxification organ. Well, we have organelles that are detoxification organelles within each cell. We have pumps like the heart and the lungs, which are inside cells, analogs of those things, which manage to keep oxygen available and to move things around as pumps. Machinery at the nanoscale and the sub-nanoscale that is in there and working all the time, carrying on the work of life, which is called metabolism. So I think I've gone a whole lot further and longer than I need to, and probably you can kick each other and wake up the people who are asleep, because I've been a little bit more complex than I had intended to. But the bottom line is that CTFO has two wonderful antioxidant supplements, which are the very best, that the most effective methods that have come about in the last 30 or 40 years within science, and I'm talking now nanotechnology, are able to give us so that we can take an endogenous antioxidant like glutathione, which people, if they wanted to get it, they had to pay upwards of $1,000 for every time that they went in and got an injection. And, I don't know how most people feel about it, but I know that as a doctor, I had trouble trying to convince people that they needed to submit to a simple subcutaneous injection with a very, very fine needle. So trying to talk them into going in and having a supplement with a large bore needle that you had to put into a major vein of the body in order to get it in was not a whole lot. Wouldn't be successful doing that with most people. And if you told them that it was going to cost upwards of $1,200 to do that, And Dr. Zinni runs a clinic where they did this, and he can talk perhaps specifically to that because it would be an interesting case. But we now can do that by simply spraying it in the mouth, thanks to science. And this company has, therefore, an antioxidant preparation, again, tied to the theory in a very, very practical way, so that you simply can get a hold of what you need, spray it in your mouth, get it in your bloodstream, and have it in the body bioavailable in a way that just has never been possible with ordinary supplements, and certainly not even imaginable until recently with things that are made inside the cells like glutathione. So these are both bookends, if you wish, to the antioxidant library, and they do their job extremely well. And it sets the company apart from all of the competitors who are still doing things the way they did when Denham Hold'em came, when the antioxidant theory of aging, or excuse me, the free radical theory of aging was elaborated in 1956. So they haven't really used the science effectively. And this company, which has considerable courage to be able to go out and spend their money and work with scientists to be able to get you something that will do both the extracellular protection that your body requires and the intracellular protection. And that is working in a field that is directly related to the theories. It's not a theoretical thing for which there is no practical application. So you're in the right place. And if you're using these, you're using the right stuff, in my opinion.
All right, Dr. T, that is so good. And I'm glad you elaborated. We will have a short version to lead people to want to know the longer version, but that longer explanation is so important because this is all new to a lot of us. And
Mhm.
yes, it is something that we're all going to face. We're facing it now, we're going to face it eventually, if not. And lots of comments in the chat. Did have one question in the chat. I know you addressed it our Super Saturday and you kind of alluded to it here, but I think it's a good question for everyone. And while I ask you this and have you answer that, I do want to say there's a lot of new folks on our call today. Just want you to know we do our calls webinar style where it's kind of like incognito, where nobody knows you're there unless you chat with everyone and say hello and use your name. But other than that, you don't. But we also ask people if they've got a product experience or a business experience that you would like to share personally, just raise your hand. It's right below the video screen. When you do that, I'll do what I did with Dr. T and I'll send you an invite to turn on your camera and your microphone and you could share a product or business story with us. But before we do that, raise your hand now if you'd like to do that and I'll call on you. But first I'm going to ask this question because I think it's a good one. It's about measuring glutathione. You alluded to, it makes it difficult to, but measuring glutathione in the body, can you measure it like you can CRP?
No, and CRP is an indirect measure of it, if you wish, because CRP is the most effective and readily available measure that you can go and take a look at the external. You're looking at the extracellular compartment when you look at CRP. It is a protein that is made by the liver when there is inflammation in the body. And so when it goes up, it indicates that the inflammation level is tremendously high. For example, recently I had double pneumonia and really, really got sick. And my CRP, which normally is below 1, went to 248. And in all the years that I had ever measured CRP in anybody, I'd never seen a value like that. And I had to measure it in myself. So, but I was very, very sick. And it was because I got into that mess because I tried a new drug. I broke my own rule. I never used to give new drugs to my patients, and I certainly never used them myself. And in this particular case, I was persuaded because I loved the person who asked me to do it, a relative of mine. And I tried it, and I got sick, and then finally, eventually developed double pneumonia. And I was out of it for 10 weeks. I was really in bad shape because an old fart like me just doesn't kick off something like a bout of double pneumonia. And by the way, it's the first time it's ever happened to me. But at my age, you just can't take insults like that and spring back from them the way I used to. So even a better reason not to use new drugs. But I got sick and I had my CRP that went sky high because my inflammation was being generated by a full body inflammatory process. It was not only the pneumonia that was driving it, it was the adverse reaction to the new drug that was driving it with the muscle inflammation that I had. So, no, you can't measure glutathione, but you certainly can measure CRP. And I think we should measure CRP because it's a valid measure indirectly of what is happening with your antioxidant system, and are you managing to keep things under control? If your CRP is out of range, no, you're not. And it's a great way, for example, to use it and then find out whether it goes down because you can measure it and you can measure it very accurately. That the answer?
Awesome. Yes, it is. All right. Thank you so much. I don't have anybody with their hand raised yet, so this is your last call. If you would like to share a product or business story. I did have several people ask me, say I wasn't recording when I was showing the photos and they wanted me to show them. So I'm just going to go back and tell you, we just had the most amazing day today with Dr. T, and the most amazing week here in Florida. So there's just a couple of pictures here. One of them is in Alabama at a meeting we did at a Mexican restaurant on what night was that? Anyway, I think it was Thursday night. And then
Yeah.
Saturday, we had a super Saturday at a home in Pensacola that we rented that everybody came to. It was great. And we just had a lot of, food and fun and just hanging out. I think we ended up spending like 7 hours together. And it was really great because what we did was we did product training, we did business training. And of course, Doc gave of himself like he always does. And then we even had like some breakouts and we had, all the leaders sharing and a lot of people there that was just, so thank you everyone that I met this week. It was just absolutely amazing. Ann Van Brussel, love her. She just has the most amazing group. But it's like, I want to say I love you all because it's not just Ann. Ann is just somebody I've known longer. I now feel like I've got this whole new giant addition to my family that I'm just getting to know. So thank you all of you that showed up for us this week. And then today we got to go fishing. And I remember 20 years ago, I had an opportunity to go fishing with Dr. T, and I didn't do it because he gets up at like 5 in the morning. And most people who know me know I am not a morning person, but I felt bad and I always regretted it. I said, if I ever get a shot to do that again. And today was the day and it was deep sea fishing. And so it was a great day today. Doc, thank you so much. And we went out with Ann, we went out with Tom and Carol Ferrier, we caught some fish. Doc and I got the biggest one, so I have a picture with just us. But anyway, it was an amazing week. And thank you, all of you who participated in everything that we did. Look forward to coming back to the area to spend more time with um, my new family, our new family. So any final words you'd like to share with everyone, Doc, before we sign off for the night?
Well, it's just that, and I have been around various companies over the years. I've worked probably with 8 or 9 companies since the long time that we spent with that one company. And I want to say that CTFO has a kind of uh, forward-looking attitude when they talk about things. They're willing to put their money where their mouth is. They will try things, and if they get a version of something and then they get it improved, they're not going to stick with their old version just because they had it and it was theirs. They'll actually bring out the new improved, and that's unusual. You just don't see that. So you're in the right company for a lot of reasons.
Awesome, Doc. I couldn't agree with you more. Whoops. Couldn't agree with you more. Feel exactly the same way. And I love the fact that we started with XanthoMyst, which is, I wouldn't be here without it. I can't even believe that GlytaMyst is now the news story right when I'm at that time, really thinking about that anti-aging, and something this amazing comes in my life. And I know there's products in the pipeline to address every need that we're going to continue to have as people and in our life. So thank you all for joining us here tonight. Thank you, Doc, again, for all that you do to serve this entire company. Love you.
You are welcome. Doc, I work with David D'Arcangelo. I can't say enough good things about him.
I agree. Thanks everyone for joining us. See you next week. Bye.